Our next speaker coming up is out west, again, at the Theodore Roosevelt Center at Dickinson State University. This is Sharon Kilzer, who is project director. She has served as project manager for the Theodore Roosevelt Center since 2008, supervising the development of standards and structure of the digitization project. With experience and training across office administration, ardent interest in history and the humanities, Sharon brings passion and enthusiasm to this nationally significant work. And this is awesome. If you haven't had a chance to hear about this, this project that's happening out in Dickinson, it is just amazing. So we look forward to your presentation, Sharon.
Well, I'm delighted to be able to talk with you this afternoon about a digital humanities project. And I was just fascinated by Dr. Rockwell's presentation. Our project might be an example of one entity creating a database that eventually will be able to be mined by those high-performance computers. And so I'm delighted for that kind of entree into what our work involves. The Theodore Roosevelt Center at Dickinson State University is developing a digital library for the 26th President of the United States. And as you, I hope, are familiar with, the Presidential Library System is an official governmental entity. There are 13 presidential libraries and museums which are administered by a government agency, the National Archives and Records Administration. They are governed by law. The papers of modern presidents belong to the American people, so that when the president leaves office, he immediately designates where his presidential library will be. Unfortunately, the documents and artifacts of earlier presidents aren't so blessed to have that system in place, and so their items tend to be scattered around the country in libraries, museums, private collections. And TR is a great example of that. But what our project is doing is we're trying to gather those papers digitally. They'll never be gathered physically. As you'll see in a minute, the institutions that hold them are very prominent and very important institutions, and the collections are important to them. So they never will be taken into one physical location. But we're digitizing those materials in cooperation with those repositories. We're cataloging them to make them searchable across a single unified collection. And so the collection will involve letters, diaries, scrapbooks, cartoons, speeches, essays, anything related to Theodore Roosevelt. And all of it will be brought into a single unified collection. Now, part of the challenge with TR is that he is said to have been the writingest president up to his day. TR wrote over 150,000 letters. He wrote as many as 40 books, depending on how you count, in the various editions that were published. And so the archive we are gathering is really quite large. Of course, after listening to Dr. Rockwell talk about 5 to 6 petabytes of data, our project doesn't seem quite so overwhelming to me, and you'll see in a minute the level of data storage that we're talking about for TR. So to look a little bit at the partners with which we're working in the project, the Library of Congress holds the papers of 23 presidents, and many of them from the earliest age of our country, but all the way up through TR. And so TR himself deposited, so the Library of Congress has a significant deposit of TR's materials, much of which he gave to them before his death, and additions that were made by the family after he passed in 1919. The early presidents held at the Library of Congress, just as a comparison, President Madison has 28 reels of microfilm. And the digital conversion specialist at the Library of Congress, working on those materials and cataloging them, took about 2.5 years to catalog the Madison collection of 28 reels. TR has 485 reels of microfilm. And so we don't plan to take 45 or 50 years to catalog these materials. We're being very creative about how we approach the project, but I just wanted to give you some sense of the scope. Again, that's the largest TR collection, but there are items held in many other repositories around the country. The next partner that we came into contact with and started to work with was the National Park Service. Our own Theodore Roosevelt National Park, just a few miles west of Dickinson, submitted a grant to the National Park Service Centennial Challenge Grant competition. And they succeeded and garnered a grant to support the digitization of materials in partnership with us at 6 sites in the Park Service system related to TR. 3 of those sites are related to his life, and 3 are memorial sites after his death, and that's how they're divided here. Of course, his birthplace in Manhattan, Sagamore Hill on Long Island, his home as an adult, the inaugural in Syracuse, New York. I'm sorry, in Buffalo, New York. And then the memorial sites, our own park, Theodore Roosevelt National Park, Theodore Roosevelt Island in Washington, D.C., and Mount Rushmore. And so each of those 6 sites is at some level in their digitization process. Some of them have finished their work. They've scanned their items and provided them to us on hard drives, which we have then loaded to our servers. Some of them have not yet begun. We're in the planning phases, determining the scope and where to begin. But each of these 6 is part of that initiative, and those items will be included. And then the most recent partner that we've formally engaged is Harvard College Library. Harvard holds the 2nd largest collection of TR materials. Harvard is TR's alma mater, and so again, he had, I think, deposited some things there, and the family added additional materials. There are more than, we know there are more than 70,000 documents. It might be significantly higher than that. We don't quite have the full scope of it. But in our initial work with Harvard, they proposed a very interesting approach, and that was to digitize everything written by TR himself. And we've started to receive deposits of those materials. It's fascinating. The staff who are working with these are just learning so much about TR by observing not just the content of the items specifically, but how his handwriting changed over his lifetime. When he wrote to his children, he usually wrote by hand. If it had to be a typed letter, he always put at least a handwritten PS. So there are really interesting observations being made from those materials coming from Harvard because of the approach they selected in digitizing what TR wrote himself. So I want to give you just one sample of an item that we have discovered, and this one is important to North Dakota, and it was I think an early discovery that I stumbled on and have been pleased to share with people since. This biography of TR, as you can see, it starts Theodore Roosevelt, President, was born in New York City on October 27, 1858, etc. This biography, it's undated, and so we guess that it is perhaps written shortly after he became president, after the assassination of President McKinley. But the interesting thing about it is, the interesting thing about TR as president is that much of the work is typewritten, which is to our great advantage, but often it has his handwritten edits. You know, when you think of a modern president, if you got a letter from President Obama or from President Bush or from President Reagan, you wouldn't guess that it probably came from his own mind or his own hand. At least for most of us. We don't have relationships such that we would be likely to get a personal letter from the president. But in TR's era, there was a very small White House staff, and so he had secretaries who typed materials for him, but then he would do his own edits. And you can see here, this is his own hand. And you begin to recognize his handwriting when you work in the collections for very long. So the first page, again, is fairly straightforward, but as he moves to the second page, right at the bottom here, it says, later in the same year, and the top of the page on the left here says, he went to North Dakota. And so what I want to do is I'm actually going to zoom in so we can see that section a little bit more closely, because I want you to see, perhaps if you can, what the typed script underneath read. It says he remained there for 2 years on a ranch engaged in raising cattle. Now, TR is known to have exaggerated, perhaps, the time he spent in North Dakota, and this is somewhat some evidence of that. Because what he's done is crossed out a portion of that, so it now reads in his own hand, He went to North Dakota and spent most of his time there for several years on a ranch engaged in raising cattle. So, you know, we often talk about why is this project in North Dakota? Why isn't it at Harvard? Why isn't it in New York, where he spent more of his life? But TR himself, again, was noted to have exaggerated, again, the time he spent here. And we have to ask, why was that? This example was not a vote-getting initiative at all. You might say that. He's a politician. He's buying votes from this area. But obviously, we've never been an area that has great national political influence. He had many friends here. He really didn't need to do that. And so why did he talk about the significance of his time here in that way? And many of us could make reference to the times that TR said, I would never have been president were it not for my time in North Dakota. So what we're doing at the TR Center is we're really digging into what does that mean? Why did TR talk about North Dakota in that way? When he puffed the time that he spent here, we would posit that it's because the time he spent here was so significant in forming his character and determining his future pursuits and his future success in life. And so this is the work that we're undertaking is to take this material page by page. There are about, of those 250,000 documents from the Library of Congress, there are about 450 to 600,000 pages of material. And we're looking at it page by page and reading and analyzing and describing it, adding keywords and subject terms to make it searchable. So that is the work of creating the digital library. And again, we see this as creating the equivalent of a presidential library for TR because the physical institution will never exist. But we're able to do this in the digital age. Another piece of our work is to place kiosks around the state and elsewhere at which people can have access to this website we're creating, this massive archive. The first kiosk was placed at Theodore Roosevelt National Park. We have several others around the state of North Dakota. Just a couple weeks ago, we dedicated the one at Grand Forks Red River High School, the Red River Rough Riders. We're very pleased to place a kiosk there. And we have plans to locate kiosks at Mount Rushmore, at Sagamore Hill on Long Island, and on the naval ship named after TR, the USS Roosevelt.